Hi, my name is Liza Tripura and this is my reflective video presentation titled Wired and Rewired: How Technology Reshaped My Mind and Behavior. In this presentation, I'm going to take you through something I think a lot of us have experienced but rarely talk about honestly: the way our devices have quietly changed how we think, feel, sleep, and connect with people. I'll be weaving my own personal experience together with academic research and three cyberpsychology theories to make sense of what's actually happening when we pick up our phones. Let me start by setting the scene. Technology is everywhere. It's in our pockets, on our wrists, on our desks, and increasingly in our beds. Most of us don't question it, we just use it. But over the past year, I started noticing something. My concentration was shorter. My mood after scrolling was often lower than before I started. And I was tired in a way that sleep didn't seem to fix. That made me ask, is this normal? Is this just life now? Or is something actually changing inside me because of how I use technology? That's what this presentation is about. The moment that really pushed me to reflect happened the night before my final exam. I told myself I would study after dinner. I sat down, opened my laptop, and then, almost without deciding to, I opened TikTok. And 3 hours disappeared, just like that. By midnight, I felt exhausted, anxious, and this is the part that surprised me. Somehow emptier than before I started scrolling. I hadn't relaxed. I hadn't been entertained in any meaningful way. I just consumed. And I felt worse for it. That moment stuck with me. And it's the reason I chose this topic. The purpose of this presentation is to critically reflect on how technology has shaped my psychological functioning and behavioral patterns, and to connect those personal observations to academic theory and research. Now, before I get into the theories, I want to ground this in what the research actually tells us, because my experience isn't unique. There's a large and growing body of evidence on exactly what technology does to human behavior. Researchers have documented four key areas of impact. First, attention. Gloria Mark at UC Irvine found in 2023 that the average time a person can focus before being distracted has dropped to around 47 seconds. Frequent device switching depletes working memory, meaning the more we multitask with our phones, the less mental capacity we have left for the things that actually matter. Second, sleep. Twenge and colleagues found that blue light from screen suppresses melatonin and that social media use before bed delays sleep onset and reduces sleep quality. I can personally confirm this. Third, mood. Farduli and Vartanian showed that passive scrolling on Instagram correlates with lower self-esteem and depressive symptoms, not because the content is explicitly harmful, but because of the constant social comparison it triggers. And fourth is persuasive design. Montag and colleagues identified that features like infinite scroll and variable reward schedules, the unpredictability of what comes next, exploit dopamine pathways and drive compulsive checking. This isn't an accident. These features are deliberately engineered. But I want to be balanced here, because technology is not simply bad. Research also shows that purposeful social media use can strengthen social connections and reduce loneliness, especially for marginalized communities. Online learning platforms expand access to education, and digital tools genuinely boost productivity when used intentionally. The key influence factors are things like how the technology is designed, whether your use is active or passive, and your own individual vulnerabilities. Things like age, personality, and how much stress you're carrying, which leads me to the psychological theories. I'm going to apply three frameworks from cyberpsychology, the branch of psychology that studies how humans behave online and in digital environments. These aren't general psychological theories. They were developed specifically to explain the kind of experiences I've been describing. The first is the I-PACE model, developed by Brand, Young, Layer, Wolfling, and Potenza in 2016. IP stands for Interaction of Person, Affect, Cognition, and Execution. The model proposes that problematic Internet use doesn't happen randomly. It develops through a cycle. It starts with the person, an individual who has a pre-existing vulnerability like stress, anxiety, or low mood. That vulnerability triggers an affective craving, a pull toward relief. Then cognition steps in with a bias, just 5 more minutes. And finally, execution. The behavior happens, and it keeps happening, even when the person is aware of the cost. Now apply that to my exam night. I was stressed, that's the person stage. I craved an escape, that's the affect stage. I told myself scrolling would help me relax. It didn't. That's the maladaptive cognition. And then I scrolled for 3 hours despite knowing I had an exam the next morning. That's compulsive execution. My experience maps onto this model almost perfectly. The second theory is the online disinhibition effect, identified by John Suller in 2004. Suller observed that people behave with significantly less psychological restraint online than they would in a face-to-face setting because of factors like anonymity, invisibility, and the absence of real-time social consequences. This effect can be benign. For example, I've posted about exam stress on anonymous forums in ways I would never speak about face to face. The distance felt safe, and it actually helped. But it can also be toxic. I've stayed in heated comment arguments until 2 a.m. I've sent messages I later regretted. I've overshared during low mood scrolling sessions. These are behaviors I would never exhibit offline, and Suller's theory explains exactly why. The disinhibition effect means that online environment changes the psychological rules we operate under, and that has real consequences for our relationships, our self-image, and our sleep. The third framework is David's cognitive behavioral model of problematic Internet use. From 2001, David Davis distinguishes between specific PIU, overuse of one particular application like TikTok, and generalized PIU, which is aimless drifting between apps with no real purpose. What makes this model especially useful is its focus on maladaptive cognitions, the distorted beliefs that keep the behavior going. For me, the belief was scrolling relaxes me. It doesn't actually, but that belief was enough to make me keep going back. Davis shows how distal causes like exam stress or loneliness feed into these beliefs, which then produce proximal outcomes, in my case, sleep loss, missed study time, and emotional exhaustion. My TikTok use fits the specific PIU category almost exactly. So, what do I actually do about it? Based on everything I've explored, both personally and academically, I've put together 6 realistic, personalized strategies. 1. Digital sunset routine, no screens 45 minutes before sleep. I've replaced that time with journaling, which also interrupts the eye pace craving loop before it starts. 2. Identify your PIU triggers. I now keep a weekly log of when and why I reach for my phone. Naming the distal cause, stress, boredom, loneliness, takes away some of its power. 3. Challenge maladaptive beliefs. Whenever I catch myself thinking scrolling will help me relax, I actively replace that with an evidence based alternative, a short walk, or a breathing exercise. 4 is pause before posting. I apply a 10-minute rule before sending late night messages, or posting anything emotional. This directly counters the toxic side of disinhibition. And fifth is break the eye-pace cycle. During study blocks, my phone goes in another room. Physically breaking the craving to execution loop is more effective than willpower alone. And sixth is use this inhibition positively. Instead of letting online openness drag me into arguments, I redirect it toward journaling, support communities, or learning platforms. To conclude, technology did not simply change me. I let my habits shape me, and that distinction matters because it means I have agency over what happens next. Through this reflection, I found that my attention, my sleep, my mood, and my social behavior have all been meaningfully affected by the way I use technology. The I-Pace model explained the night I lost 3 hours to TikTok before my exam. The online disinhibition effect explained the late night posts and messages I later regretted. And Davis's PIU model confirmed that my patterns aren't random, they are driven by specific triggers and beliefs that I can identify and address. What I've learned from this process is something I think goes beyond this assignment. Naming what's happening is not the same as solving it, but it is the first step. Critical self awareness, the willingness to look at your own behavior honestly, is itself a skill, and reflection, it turns out, is something worth practicing. And these are my references. Thank you.